Wolf Blitzer thought he was stepping into a routine interview. Instead, he got steamrolled by Congressman John James, who came armed with facts, fire, and zero patience for the tired double standards of the media. In just a few minutes, James exposed why so many Americans are fed up with the hypocrisy, the selective outrage, and the broken promises coming from the left, and he left Wolf practically begging for a commercial break. Let's break it all down.
Hey y'all, and welcome to PoliticalConfrontation. My name is Brian, and John James makes Wolf Blitzer consider an early retirement, all because Wolf can't help but ask these really asinine questions. Let's dive in.
Are you going to need Democratic support, Congressman, like we saw last year, for example, in order to keep the U.S. government open?
You know what? We will give Democrats every single chance to work with us on doing things that help the American people. I was so excited to hear the applause from both sides of the room when President Trump was talking about doing things like lowering the cost of housing, like doing things of making sure that we keep Americans safe. That is the focus. And coming up with a big, broad, audacious goal to do everything from plant American flag on Mars to making a $500 billion investment in artificial intelligence to make sure that we continue to stay ahead of our adversaries and also harness that great power to lower the cost of health care and make sure that we can compete and lower prices for everybody a long time in the future.
As you know, Congressman, hundreds of January 6th rioters have now been pardoned or had their sentences commuted by President Trump. And those who beat police officers had their sentences commuted in the process. Was President Trump right to pardon these people?
President Trump is focused squarely on the future, and I firmly believe that's where most Americans are right now. We absolutely must support our police, we absolutely must support law enforcement, and we absolutely must move our nation forward. I support the police, and so does everybody else here, and I wasn't there then, but the law enforcement officers, the Capitol Police whom I've met here, have been a part of keeping my family and my friends safe in the Capitol each and every single day, and we applaud their efforts.
So what kind of message, Congressman, do these pardons and commutations send to law enforcement? You support law enforcement, yet these people who attacked law enforcement on January 6th are now going to be free.
You know, leftists weren't too concerned with attacks on law enforcement when we saw them getting cold-cocked on New York cities during BLM riots a couple of years ago. If you're going to be upset with one, you got to be upset with the other, or we call that what? Hypocrisy. Right now, we're focused on moving forward and not making the same mistakes of the past, and that's what we're going to be doing right here.
Well, let me just press you, Congressman. Was President Trump right in commuting the sentences of these rioters who wound up with bats and with sticks and beat police officers, some of whom were very seriously injured, and a few actually died?
Wolf, were the BLM rioters right when they went across the country and burned?
I'm asking you about what happened on January 6th. I'm not asking about Black Lives Matter. I'm asking about January 6th, Congress.
And see, and this is a part of your problem. The part of the reason that people feel so disconnected from pundits and politicians is because you don't understand where people are coming from. People see chaos all over the country, and they're seeing where one part gets punished and the other part doesn't. The fact of the matter is there are people who are truly hurting out there. They don't see what's going on, and President Trump is doing his best to move our country forward, unlike what President Biden did. And so we're moving our country forward, and we're focused on the future. I support our police. There's no excuse for hurting police officers. I applaud our law enforcement officers, but we need to move forward in the future and make sure that never happens again.
As you know, President Trump also issued an executive order attempting to overturn birthright citizenship, which is included, as you know, in the 14th Amendment. Does he have the authority to disregard what's in the Constitution by executive order?
Well, you know, we talk about respect for the Constitution, executive order, and fiat. Joe Biden definitely tested that with preemptive pardons, which dubious constitutionality to that at best. The fact is the 14th Amendment was established to give black people, formerly enslaved people, equal protection under the law. And the fact is that this is actually a draw for illegal immigrants who are taking advantage of our rights and privileges, frankly, that African Americans worked for hundreds of years before they were even acknowledged. Part of the reason that people are so upset, particularly in the African American community, is
In this segment, Brian from PW is breaking down a heated exchange between Congressman John James and CNN's Wolf Blitzer, where Blitzer repeatedly tries to corner James with questions about Trump's pardons for January 6th rioters. Wolf keeps pressing about whether it was right to free people who attacked police officers during the Capitol riot. However, John James skillfully deflects, refusing to directly criticize Trump. Instead, he shifts focus to broader national issues, emphasizing that Americans are tired of selective outrage, pointing out that during the 2020 BLM riots, left-wing media and politicians weren't equally outraged when police officers were violently attacked. James argues that you can't cry foul about law enforcement being assaulted in one case while ignoring it in another, calling that hypocrisy. As Wolf keeps pressing about January 6 specifically, John James criticizes the media for being out of touch with real public frustration, that Americans, especially minorities, see the system as biased and that illegal immigration has created new tensions, particularly in Democrat-run cities where immigrants are prioritized over struggling minority citizens. He explains that African Americans and others who worked for centuries for their rights now feel sidelined as illegal immigrants benefit from government aid, housing, and resources. James highlights that the 14th Amendment was intended to protect former slaves.
See liberals giving illegal immigrants more resources and rights than blacks have gotten in 400 years. And that is a part of the disconnect that a lot of liberals don't see. The fact of the matter is that we need to take a look at this. We need to see where our laws are being abused and then address that. I'm sure it's going to be taken up in court, but the fact of the matter is this: the 14th Amendment was established to give black people equal protection under the law, and I don't think that illegal immigration was figured into the constitutionality argument when I found drew up that document.
Y'all, just take a brief look at the very end of this video and look specifically at Wolf Blitzer. Look at his body language. The dude is just looking down, realizing that I've made a terrible mistake. What am I supposed to do next? He is begging for a commercial break with the way this question ends. But what John James is talking about here is that for some reason, the left and the mainstream media just turns the other way and just whistles past the graveyard. They wonder what's possibly going on. We don't know why black Americans are so ticked off with us. Maybe it's because illegal immigrants have come into this country without any vetting whatsoever. They have taken up residence in these hotels across American cities, particularly Democrat-run cities, and they are taking up resources from the taxpayers that usually go to minority communities. Minorities aren't stupid, okay? Conservatives understand that. I don't think liberals do. But for some reason, liberals think that, we need to protect these people as much as we possibly can and not give them the ultimate ability of freedom to move around the country. We need to protect them. It's our burden. Okay, that nonsense needs to go away. John James is talking about how bad Democrat policies have been for black Americans, for native-born of Latino descent, for people that still live in these Democrat-run cities. He's calling out this nonsense because he has seen it himself. And so, what Wolf Blitzer is trying to do is he's trying to flip the script about law and order, because he's originally talking about something completely different, about a certain riot down at the Capitol on that fateful January day, and what that's called is essentially waving the bloody shirt, okay? That was a phrase that got started after the war between the states, when what was then known as the Radical Republicans would not shut up about the war. Well, after about a decade, voters in the Midwest, voters on the border states, and voters from the southern states who have just been regrafted into the United States were so tired of the ridiculous policies that only benefited one set of people. They were so angry about the ridiculous rhetoric. And furthermore, they were mad about how only one group of people, particularly in the Northwest and parts of Pennsylvania and Ohio, were getting all the goodies from the tariffs. They were getting all the goodies from the taxes. They were getting all...
Not to incentivize illegal immigration, and he questions whether modern interpretations of birthright citizenship are constitutionally valid. Brian, analyzing all this, says Wolf Blitzer's body language clearly shows he realizes he is losing control of the conversation, desperate for a commercial break. Brian further explains that the media is stuck, waving the bloody shirt, a term from post-Civil War America where radical Republicans kept invoking the Civil War's horrors to justify their policies, long after voters had moved on to other concerns. Similarly, today's liberal media keeps focusing on January 6th while ignoring voters' real-life struggles with crime, immigration, and economic hardship. Brian points out that America is a melting pot, not a tossed salad, meaning people from all backgrounds blend together with shared values, and that voters across racial lines are fed up with Democrats treating minority voters like a guaranteed political resource, offering little in return. He accuses Democrats of neglecting the communities they rely on for votes, letting infrastructure rot while prioritizing new immigrant populations. That's why voters are angry. They feel abandoned, and John James is simply giving voice to those frustrations. Brian concludes that Wolf Blitzer can't admit this on CNN because of ideological pressure inside the network. He wraps up by commending John James for standing firm, exposing the media's hypocrisy, and predicting that the Democrats' refusal to face reality, especially on issues like illegal immigration and crime, will lead to major political consequences. Brian encourages viewers to like and subscribe, promising more such honest breakdowns in the future.
All the kickbacks that they wanted to help their economy while everyone else was left out hanging to dry. And so the American people got so ticked off that in the 1876 election, it went straight to Congress. And so finally, there was an agreement made that a Republican would be elected president, but you got to end a whole lot of policies. And then the Democrat and Republican Party basically went tit for tat with each other for the next 40 years. And so basically the moral of that story is the radical Republicans, right after the war between the states, ended up burning all the bridges of goodwill because they would not stop waving the bloody shirt. Instead of talking about issues that actually dealt with the problems that people were actually facing, they wouldn't shut up about one particular issue. And so we're facing a similar issue with voters here today. Voters in America across the spectrum, white, black, Latino, you name it, let's be honest, America's a melting pot for a reason. I hate the theory that we're actually more like a tossed salad. No. America's a melting pot. And so the entire melting pot right now is genuinely angry at how Democrats have been treating them for so long. Because Democrats have seen the lower classes, they've seen minority voters as this well to go back constantly and just redraw like they're drawing water from a well, and instead of actually making sure that there's water flowing in, that the well is clean, and ultimately that the structure is intact. The Democrats have refused to upkeep their end of the bargain, and so those voters that require that well water are ticked. Okay? That's what's going on here. And so John James is trying to explain to Wolf Blitzer that, hey, you're asking the wrong questions. Instead of talking about the riot at the Capitol, you need to be talking about the segment of the population that decided to go crazy during the summer of 2020 and saw no consequences for it. And that's why the pardons seem like they're so one-sided. Well, if one side is treated differently than another side for a riot, don't you think there needs to be some equalizing force there? Wouldn't you say that's sort of fair, Wolf? And I think Wolf Blitzer has enough journalistic integrity and, enough basic integrity to answer yes to that question, but he can't say that, not on CNN. That would cause a miniature riot in their own building and might get him fired on the spot. So he can't afford to say certain things because, again, Democrats treat minority voters like some guaranteed plantation workers, and instead of dealing with their needs and their problems, they instead take them completely for granted. So ultimately, Wolf Blitzer is talking a bunch of nonsense. John James is giving a fantastic answer line by line, and particularly right there at the end, when he lays bare the reality. That is that the Democrats have refused to talk about illegal immigration, and now the chickens are coming home to roost. And Wolf Blitzer, let's be honest, there's a lot of clucking back in your hen house. Folks, my name is Brian. Hope you enjoyed that segment here on PoliticalConfrontation. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Catch you on the next one. Until then, y'all have a good one.